In this session, we're going to take a look at not just managing, but also licensing users in Microsoft 365, and specifically exactly how it works, and also how to avoid the pitfalls. Stay tuned, you will learn something. Greetings, my fellow YouTubers. Welcome back to the channel. Andy Malone, Microsoft MVP. So nice to see you here. Hey, especially if this is your first time. On today's episode, I thought I would take you through the very basics of creating user accounts. It's so important that you get this feature right because it affects everything. So we're going to talk about all the different parts of a user account along with the licensing. And in some cases, you might not even need a license for a user account. So stay tuned for that because I'm going to explain the licenses and how they work as well. Now, I've just noticed that only 20% of you are actually subscribing to my channel. So please give me some support, show me some love, bump the subscribe button, come on board and join my learning community that I'm trying to build. I would really appreciate it. Now, if you enjoy the session, bump the like button. It does make a difference. And of course, as ever, if you've got questions and comments, always just get those down below and I'll do my best for you. So I think without any further ado, let's jump in and take a look at some demos and start learning. Enjoy. So the first steps in managing our users, I'm going to come into my Microsoft 365 and I'm going to come into the admin portal. In the admin portal, there are two places that you can create users. I can either come into my user node here and active users, or I can just come down and show all and go into Azure Active Directory. Either way, it's the same users, and of course, this is all Azure Active Directory, of course. Azure Active Directory is the main directory service that you would use to manage all of your resources in Microsoft 365 and Azure as well. So you can see that we have exactly the same users here. Let me just make this a little bit bigger. There we go. You've got exactly the same users as you have here. I'm commonly asked, Andy, what's the best portal to use? To be honest, there are things that you can do in the Microsoft 365 portal that you can't do in the Azure portal, and vice versa. So actually, there is no one portal to rule them all. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a user. So I'm going to create my user and I'm going to call this user, we'll call him Bob Jones. Okay. So Bob Jones, put in his display name, and again it asks you, okay, what do you want to call the user? You could put in the username as Bob, but the problem is you might have multiple Bobs in your organization. So it's always a good kind of rule of thumb to use the surname followed by the initials. Now you can see it automatically fills in the domain name for me. So again, the user at tenant.onmicrosoft.com. Now, if you have your own custom domain name, that may say bobb@mycompany.com, for example. If you want to know how to add a custom domain name, check out my DNS video, and I'll put the link below there. Now, at this point, I can automatically create a password or manually create a password. I can require the user to change their password when they sign in. Ultimately, though, really what you're looking for, though, is to kind of eliminate passwords by trying to encourage users to use things like multi-factor authentication. And I'll come back to that in a moment. So I'm simply going to click on Next. And then, very importantly, you need to choose the location of the user. And this will determine which data center will hold the user's data. The next step then is I can now say, hey, do you want to assign a license to the user? So you can see I can go ahead, and in this case, I'm going to assign an E3 license to this user as well as a Windows 10 license, or a Windows 10/11. Now you can also create the user without a product license. A common question is, Andy, if I wanted to add on or change a license, do I need to recreate the user in any way? Not at all. All you simply do is add on the features that you want to bring in. If you want to, let's say, change to an E5 or back again, you simply can downgrade to a different license type. So you don't need to delete and recreate any users again. All right. I'm going to click on next, and the next thing it says, okay, do you want the user to be assigned any admin roles within the organization? So if you want the user to have admin access, there are a number of kind of standard key roles that you can use. So for example, if you want the user to be a SharePoint and a Teams administrator here, again, that might be useful. Just a note, by the way, you don't have to be licensed in order to have an admin account. So for example, the most powerful admin account is a global admin. The second most powerful is a user administrator. So the key thing is if you were working with a partner or with somebody in your organization, you wanted them to be an administrator, they don't necessarily need to be licensed. And in fact, it's probably a good thing if you create a separate global admin that doesn't have a user account in 365 and just use that account separately, and then for your regular day-to-day work you would use that regular Microsoft 365 account. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to click on next. Oh, just go back 1 second. The other thing was you can also put in a profile here. So I can put in a job title, so I can say he's a member of the sales staff. I can put in sales here. You can put in some details on the user's location. I'm in Oslo this week, for example. I'm sure you get the idea. So I'm going to click on next, and I'm going to finish that setup. Now, one of the nice things about 365, by the way, that you can't do in Azure is you can actually create a template here. So I can say sales FTE. This is a full-time employee for sales, and again I'm going to create a template. You can put in a description and you can choose to make the template available. I'm now going to just save that template, and I'm going to click on close. So the advantage of that is now if I want to create a similar user with similar attributes, I can simply go here, and sure enough, the sales FTE is now available. All right, so that's the first way to create a user account. Now, the other thing that I just wanted to mention is another way you can also use something called PowerShell. And PowerShell can be found. Of course, PowerShell is a shell, and it's very modular based. So if you want to, for example, create 365 user accounts, you can either use the Azure Active Directory PowerShell module, or you can use the Microsoft 365 module. So once you've got the module, how do I get the module, Andy? You simply scroll down and it says, okay, first of all, you need to connect to your tenant. So you can go off, and the first thing you need to do is get-module and Azure AD or MS Online. So once you've got the module, you install the module, install-module, either -name Azure AD or MS Online. So once you've installed it, you then import it. So import -module, and now the next thing is I now want to connect to it. So once you've connected to it, and it shows you how to do it, the next step then is obviously creating a user. So for example, if I was using the MSOL Microsoft Online module, I would type in new -MSOL user the name of the user. So here, so Jones B, for example. dash first name James, last name Jones, James Jones, and you then create that user. You can then assign the user a license. So MSL account SKU is the license details. So you can see here that you get a step-by-step guide onto how to create that. All right. You can also do a bulk import as well. So you can create a CSV file, which looks a little bit like a spreadsheet with a whole bunch of names, by the way. One piece of fun, by the way, is if you use ChatGPT, ask ChatGPT to create you a PowerShell script to import your users. It's absolutely super smart. So once you've done that, the next stage is then let's have a look at our user that we've created. So I'm going to just flip over here. I'm just going to refresh this page, and sure enough, here is a user that I created. So Bob Jones has now been created. So let's take a look at some of the properties that this user can have. So here in the properties, we have a number of sheet tabs. So in the account sheet tab here, you've got information like an alias, and you can manage usernames and aliases. And check it out, you can have as many aliases as you want. You can have multiple aliases. So for example, sales@mycompany.com and so on. This screen's really useful because it shows you the last time the user actually signed in. So you get like a little log here. If the user's got another email address, so you can add in additional email address. Is the user a member of any groups? So again, I can click on to manage groups here, and I can go off and assign membership to a group if I want to. You can also see what roles the user has access to. So in this case, you can see that I've gone ahead and add him to the Teams and SharePoint admin roles. You can see that you can assign a manager. A manager is really useful. So for example, if I bring in Adele as his manager, then if this account was deleted, Adele would essentially have access to his account for up to 30 days. You can also do something called priority monitoring. So if this user is a priority user, it will provide things like priority logs for you to use, which again is really super. Again, you can also customize the contact information here as well, which is super easy to do. You can also change the photo of the user. Again, in devices, if the user has got any devices registered, a Windows 11 machine or an iPhone or something, that would be listed here. And then you have licenses and apps. So again here, you can choose the location, the license that you have. Again, you can add and remove licenses without necessarily deleting the user account. Sorry, just go back in. The next thing then is the mail. So you can see that it integrates into Exchange Online. So because I have a licensed user, you can see that the user's mailbox here, and it would show how much mail the user has used, how much his mailbox is used. And again, you can set mail permissions here as well. So for example, reading and managing permissions. So we have different sets of permissions for email. So do you want to assign read and manage permissions to maybe his colleague, Bob's colleague? Do you want to grant send as permissions or send on behalf of? So let me just explain the difference. Send on behalf of might be, for example, if Bob's got a secretary and you want her to be able to send messages on behalf of him. Whereas send as permissions, the secretary, when she answers the emails, it actually looks like it's coming from Bob. Okay. Do you want to show Bob's name in the global address list? So do you want him to be discoverable? Do you want to forward his email? Do you want to set up automatic replies? And again, you've also got some other actions as well. Interestingly here as well, you can also reset Bob's password. Now, if you're not quite ready for Bob to sign in, you can block Bob's sign-in, and this will prevent Bob from actually being able to log in. Please note, however, once you license a user, you are actually paying for that license. So whether he's signed in or not is pretty much irrelevant. You can also delete the user. If you delete the user, it goes into the recycle bin here, deleted users, for up to 30 days. And if you want to restore it back within any of that 30 days, you can just click in and choose the user and then restore. So that's really useful. We also have OneDrive access here as well. So again, just because I created this user, this account is still provisioning. Let me show you another one that I created. So if I scroll down here, I've created a user called, in fact, let me use Adele as an example. So here is Adele, and I can go into Adele's OneDrive, and you can see it gives me, do I want to get access to Adele's files? So maybe she's having a problem, maybe she needs support. Again, this is not snooping on the user, this is really being able to offer support. And do remember, as an administrator, if you gain access here, then it will be logged, it will be audited. So if you're thinking of doing something that's unethical, it won't work here, trust me. Again, you can also, you've got your overall storage capacity for the organization, how much space you've used, and so on. So again, those are the attributes for the user here. Now, I did mention that you can also make and create users in Azure Active Directory as well. But what you see here is slightly different. So in here, this is again really useful. So you can go in and you can edit any of these features. So the nice thing about this screen is you get access to things like the audit logs, as well as things like the sign-in logs. So you can see when the users last signed in, and you can also diagnose problems. You can also see the assigned roles, if the user is a member of a group, what applications has been assigned to the user, what licenses have been assigned to the user here, and again, you can assign licenses here as well. You can also see, you'll notice that some of these are Azure specific as well. So things like you can manage the authentication methods of this user. So I can fill in some details, alternative email and phone details, and I can require this user to use, for example, multi-factor authentication. All right, so that is creating the user and managing the user. Now, the other thing that I just wanted to mention, very importantly, of course, is licensing. So I'm going to scroll up here. I'm going to come into billing. Now, if I click into, first of all, your products, these basically show you all the products that you've got, ultimately how many licenses that you have, and how many have been used. And also, ultimately, it will show you if you've started any trial licenses and they've gone ahead and expired. It will also show you if you have any benefits as well. Now, if I click into the Licenses tab, you can see that you can assign licenses either to users or groups. And licenses can also be requested by users as well. So any requests would come through here, and you can then either accept them or reject them. Now, if you're using an auto claim policy, what this does is you can create a policy, and you would typically do this if somebody's accessing an application. It might be for operational reasons, and you want to auto assign a license to some feature. It will tell you your bills and payments here as well. So again, be very careful of purchasing licenses, because when you purchase a license, you are paying for that license. So if you only need 10 licenses at the moment, don't go and purchase 100, because you will be paying for 100 licenses. All right, so only purchase what you need. Now, of course, this may differ depending on the arrangement that you have with Microsoft. So all the billing section, of course, is here. So if I decide to delete Alan, you can see that do I want to grant access to Alan's mailbox or OneDrive for 30 days. And this can be quite useful if a user is leaving the organization. So I can then specify which user I want to give access to for 30 days. Now, I'll go and delete that user. And of course, you might now go, oh my goodness, I didn't mean to delete that user. What will I do? So of course, what you can now do, you see, it now unassigns the license. So it unassigns all of those licenses back. So now I can simply come into deleted users, and of course there is Alan. I can select that user and restore him back. And again, it will just auto generate the password, and it will then bring that user back exactly as he was before. Okay, I can also send that user an email, of course. So that's one way. What we've looked at there is creating, managing, and deleting a user account there. So as I've mentioned, as well as creating and managing users, you might also want to add a user or provide a user with admin role permissions. And you can either do that from within Azure Active Directory here, or you can do it from within Microsoft 365. So what I'm going to do here is, first of all, I've got a number of users here. I'm going to go into Christie's account, and I'm running out of licenses for my demos. So one of the things that I want to do with Christie's account is I want to revoke her license. And so I'm going to go into licenses and apps, and this can be quite useful. So if it's a user that's not been used for a while, what I can do is I can remove these accounts. But you'll notice I can also change the licenses without deleting the account as well. So I'm going to just simply remove the licenses for this user, and I'm going to save that account. So now that I've done that, what I want to do is I'm just going to close that down, and of course, Christie doesn't have any licenses anymore. But that's okay. What I can do is I want her to have admin privileges. So I'm going to scroll down here to admin roles, and I'm going to come into my admin center access, and I want her to be a global admin. With the global admin, I'm going to save those changes, and she will now be able to log fully on to perform her admin skills. Now, one of the nice things about this feature is that, it's quite useful and good security practices that you should have maybe a couple of accounts. So if Christie does need a regular Microsoft 365 account, you can assign, and you can then assign the appropriate license and so on. But typically, it's good practice that she's not an administrator with a regular account. So in this case, I've created a second account, and you can see that she is just a global admin here as well. So key thing, you don't need to have a license to be an administrator. So again, a lot of people go ahead and make that mistake. So there you have it, getting started with creating and managing and administering users. And also, hopefully, you're a little bit wiser now about licensing. Thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, definitely click out that subscribe button if you've not joined us before. It would be great to have you on board. And again, comments and questions, as always, just get those down below. And I will always do my best for you. Thanks very much for tuning in. I'll see you next time. Take care. Hey, thanks so much for dropping by today. Here's a couple of videos that you may enjoy, and while you're here, go ahead, click on the subscribe button and you won't miss out.